Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Welcome Table. Today, we are joined by Brittnay Proctor. How are you doing today?
Good. How about yourself?
Doing good, doing good. Professor Proctor is a visiting assistant professor in the Gender and Sexualities Department. She focuses on Black studies, gender and sexuality studies, Black feminist theory, and Black popular music. So we're so excited to be talking to you today. I think this is our first time talking about Black music, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so I'm super excited.
Yes, exactly. But before we get started, we're going to do a little show and tell.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to go first this week. And
All right.
considering, that you are a Black music fan, I brought this record. It's the Fifth
that's
Dimension.
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah, they're so cool. And I love the cover art. They're wearing black turtlenecks. I'm wearing black turtlenecks. So we're all matching. And then I love this part of it too, like the outside cover. And one of the songs on it, obviously probably one of their more well-known songs, Aquarius, Let the Sun Shine. It reminded me of Le Fleurs by Minnie Riperton. And that was a song that you dissected during an event that I actually covered that we're going to talk about later.
Awesome.
It's like the transitionary nature of the song, really it reminded me of that. So that's why I brought that today.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. What did you bring?
I brought Minnie Riperton's Come to My Party. So yay, albums in the house today.
Yes, that's awesome.
But it's an album that I personally love and that I'm currently writing about. And in the fall of 2020, we'll hopefully have a book published about. So it's a very near and dear album to me. And I really love it. And
it's a great album. You actually put me on it at that event because I only knew like Loving You by Minnie Riperton before, but I'm like, oh dang, like she has
a lot more, yeah.
Right.
So our first question today is, well, you graduated from Northwestern University with a PhD in African American Studies. How did you end up taking an interest in gender and sexuality studies?
That's a good question. So as an undergraduate at the University of California, Riverside, I had the fortune to double major, and one of my majors was African American Studies. And a lot of my I just think the coursework that I took was always thinking about the relationship between Blackness, gender, and sexuality. And in particular, I got to take coursework with Jana Brown. She's faculty at Pratt Institute in New York now, but she was faculty at the time at UCR. And she just was, doing research on Black feminism, gender and sexuality studies, on Black performance at the intersections of gender and sexuality. So I think I've always thought about, Black studies as in conversation, or at least trying to deal with some of the topics and concepts in the field of gender and sexuality studies. So I really had the opportunity in graduate school to try and bring these fields together in my own work. So
that's amazing. That's awesome. How does that coincide with your passion and interest for Black music, Black popular music?
I think that I'm always interested in the way that and for a long time, probably since I've been listening to music, I've always been interested in the way that Black music and Black popular music in particular is always taken up or tried to deal with questions of gender and sexuality. And I think that's always been something that it just piqued my interest in, is something I've been really trying to always, even in my undergraduate thesis, trying to write through some of that. How can we turn to Black popular music to think, differently about universal concepts like man and woman, for example, or how can we think differently about gender and sexuality when we think about the ways that many of these artists are trying to work through, or at least incorporating some of, I would say, gender theory in their work. So I think that's how I see those related.
Yeah, I can think of a whole bunch of artists that like combine their sort of like, not like, I don't want to say like combine their gender, but for example, when you speak of gender and sexuality, I think of like Prince, you know what I mean? And he's one that has always piqued my interest. My mom loves Prince. I love Prince. So yeah, we'll probably talk more about that later, but yeah.
Yeah, I think an artist like Prince was definitely so weird to talk about him in the past tense, but to think about, you know, how a lot of his work is, you know, interested in Black masculinity and is trying to, you know, articulate a different relationship to the notion of Black, what it means to be a Black man in particular.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally think that his work is always thought about gender and sexuality in interesting ways.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I'm just visualizing some of his music videos and like I don't know, the line between gender and like sexuality is so blurred within them, and it's so cool. They're so beautifully done.
Right, almost a bit androgynous. Right?
Yeah. No. So the next question is, I actually got to cover one of your talks, and it was really, really cool. Back when I was an intern at New U, I was really interested in one of the talks that you gave about Minnie Riperton, specifically about her album that you actually showed for your show and tell. So it's called Come to My Garden, right?
Yes.
Come to My Garden.
Yes.
That's super, super cool. As I said, I was only familiar with like Loving You, and that was basically it. But then you analyzed this album and you played excerpts from this one particular song, Le Fleurs, and I just thought it was so beautiful, and your talk was beautifully done. So I just wanted to ask you, can you, there was one phrase that you use called the law of genre, and it was just really interesting to hear you explain it. Can you explain it a little bit to our audience as it pertains to that album and to Black music in general?
So the law of genre is a term that I'm borrowing from Jacques Derrida, who's a French philosopher. And in an essay titled The Law of Genre, he's thinking about, you know, how the concept or category of genre is rooted in the notion of not mixing types or kinds. So that's across genre, right? And so I'm trying to think about, on one end, this kind of anxiety around mixing in the context of Black popular music, and the kind of racial antagonisms that are tied to this notion of mixing, which is, it's heretical, but it's also, and we can say it's not, or that the notion of mixing, in particular, mixing Black with white, and in this instance, Black sound with white sounds, is, you know, not necessarily, it's a kind of hysteria that is posited by white folk in particular. And I'm trying to think about why there is this preoccupation with genre in this particular moment. So the album was released in 1970, and there's this new genre of music emerging called fusion music, and there's a lot of folk, particularly white men, that are writing about jazz at the time that are not happy with the emergence of fusion music, are pretty pissed that people are taking jazz standards and jazz compositions and fusing them with popular sounds. And I'm curious as to why there is this kind of hysteria around fusion, even if we understand that fundamentally Black popular music is intertextual and is always thinking about, coalescing itself across space and time, and isn't, you know, rooted in the genre. So in one way, I'm trying to think about genre as a way of policing Black popular music, but I also am interested in thinking about how the law of genre is also related to gender. And, you know, the etymology of the word genre comes out of a French for the word gender. So to market a kind or type, in that instance, around the sex gender binary. So I'm trying to take some of my thoughts around gender as genre and think them in relationship to the kind of use of genre to codify and police Black popular music.
Codify and police Black popular music. That's such an interesting concept, especially because you took a phrase from someone else's work and you applied it to your own, like derived your own conclusions. That's amazing.
No, that's super, super cool. And I remember that you used the garden as an analogy for Black femininity. So can you kind of go into that a little bit more? I'm sure you can explain it much better than I can.
This is from
Oh, yes.
Minnie Riperton.
Minnie Riperton.
Yeah. So she's in a garden on the album cover, and obviously it's titled "Come to My Garden." So I'm returning to some of those ideas that were initially presented in the talk, and thinking about Black women's relationship to gardens, and then in general, just thinking about Black people's historic relationship to gardens, and how, you know, this idea, or this the placeness of the garden in this album is like very, very important. As of now, I'm trying to think about the ways that the garden gets personified as a kind of cultivation of Black womanhood in the album. So not presuming that, you know, Black women are biologically produced, and that the things that we produce and create are somehow tied to biological phenomena, and that we naturally can sing, and, you know, that's, you know, and that we naturally are performers, or that we're naturally on this earth to entertain people, particularly white people. What I'm trying to think about is, you know, how does this album discursively, so it's not that Minnie herself is saying, hey, this is what this album is up to, but how can we take some of the themes in the album, in particular the garden, think about the Black woman's historic and Black people's historic relationship to the garden, and think differently about Black women's subjectivity. So
Beautiful.
yeah,
Beautiful. And I'm a little bit jealous that Tatum went to the event, but yeah, I know you'll probably be hosting more events and things like that in the future. So thank you for sharing that with us. Going back to the music industry as a whole, right? What are some of the most pertinent issues that you see for Black artists currently and also in the past?
So I think why I'm interested in writing about Black popular music is that sometimes I think larger concerns that are emerging in Black studies and in gender, and to some degree in gender and sexuality studies, is trying to think about this concept of dispossession, and think about the ways that Black people, because of the ontology of their or the ontology of Blackness, meaning, you know, being Black, the being of, or how Blackness gets to be and function in the world is intimately tied to dispossession, and Black people being dispossessed of their life, the things they create. So I'm interested, I think, in, you know, in thinking about the industry or the music industry, which is a pretty broad term, but thinking about how music industries are kind of conditionally based, or can only exist by way of dispossessing Black people of the things they create and innovate. And I think one of the biggest issues, we can see this in so many ways, but one of the biggest issues that Black artists face is, you know, being overworked, underpaid, but being dispossessed of the innovations that they make in music writ large, but in popular music in particular. And it's kind of a free-for-all where it's, you know, folk get to just, you know, steal and take from Black artists, don't have to credit them, and on the same in the way that the kind of capitalistic enterprise that's tied to the way that we consume music is so much tied up and wrapped up in, you know, stealing from Black artists and accumulating capital off of the Black backs of artists' labor, and, you know, whether that be artists Black artists historically not being given the rights to their masters, not, you know, having, you know, being kind of trapped into, I won't use the word, but really messed up recording deals, and just, I mean, it's so pervasive, and at every level it's and even if we think about who gets to write about Black popular music and make careers out of like writing about Black music in general, but about Black popular music, I think a lot of critics of and writers about Black music often are white men, or in general, people that aren't Black. And it's another insidious way that that we can continue to kind of still and mind the thoughts and ideas and creative work of Black artists, because it's kind of a free for all everywhere. So I think that's dispossession is one of the biggest hurdles that Black artists face, and I don't know how we can fix that per se, but I think that's really,
Because the line between admiration and imitation is very blurred within like the artistic realm, and it's to the point where like, I mean, sometimes I look at Ariana Grande, for instance, and I'm like, that is a light-skinned woman. Like, she is Black, but like she's not. So it's like, yeah, it's definitely the imitation and theft is like very pervasive within the music industry. So when you say that, like lots of songs and people are like kind of ringing in my head, and unseen faces of the Black artists who came up with those concepts and styles of music and stuff.
It's super, super unfortunate. Most people don't even know that many pop artists like have stolen, you know, and it's a crazy fact of the music industry, in my opinion. But
it's pervasive, and you know, I mean, I'm sure folk are well intended if that even really matters, but it's just so pervasive that, you know, even drawing attention to it, it's like this knee-jerk kind of reaction. It's very reactionary, right? When folks try to name what's happening, folk are like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Like, you know, music. And I think that, not to belabor the point, but I think there is a way that we talk about music as this place of like democratization, and, you know, it's an even playing field. And, you know, in many ways, if we think about the lives of Black music artists, that has not been the case, right? It hasn't been. It's been an even playing field to steal and dispossess folk of the things that they create, but it hasn't been an even democratized space. And we shouldn't, it's okay to not talk about music as this transcendental place where everyone's in harmony together and, you know, loving on each other. It can be, there is a politics to music. So.
Definitely. Yeah, it's very political. I mean, I don't know, there's so many messages within music, covert or overt. So I think it's very interesting to listen to it intentionally like you do, you know, and really consider what it means and not just listen to it on a surface level. And your passion for music actually, you know, it boils down to the written form as well. Several of your works have been published in the Journal of Popular Music Studies, the Journal of Popular Culture, and the American Literature Journal, and many more. How is it writing your passions out? Like, what is it like to have your work published, and what is it like to write about your passions for music?
To be honest, it's kind of antagonistic. I really struggle with writing. And and in particular, like I struggle with like writing about sound. That's something that's really hard for me. In the end, it feels rewarding, but it's very hard for me to write in general. And it feels nice when something is like out in the universe, and if people find it useful, that's a good feeling. But I think the actual process of writing for me is, I deal with writing anxiety. I've gotten much better, but I think that because I don't ever want, a lot of the times I'm writing about elders or folk that have transitioned off of this earthly plane. So I never want to be disrespectful, and I never want to be writing in a way that is not honorific of their labors, honorific of the, you know, the masterful ways that they were able to create. And I don't want to ever use their work in a way that feels like is like out of my own self-interest for something. So that's all those things kind of make me feel like I probably obsess way too much over getting things on the page, and that's probably why I have writing anxiety, but I enjoy what I get to do, and I feel very fortunate, but it is hard to write about. the things that I write about sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure to, I mean, not speak on behalf of, but write about people who have passed on and who, you know, can't speak for themselves, obviously. So, but you do it so well, and I think you do it very intentionally. So,
going back to you and like your personal, I guess, music interests, what are your top albums and why are they significant to you? And I know this is a hard question, but we're so interested.
Well, this album is like one of the top.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in general, I have older parents in comparison to folk my age. And I was just fortunate for them to hit me to a bunch of really good music. And so I do listen to a lot of R&B and soul of the 1960s and 1970s, and a lot of my
yes, that's the best.
And a lot, and a lot of the things that I write come out of that, like those decades. I just love Black music. I think that, you know, the things that just across genre, which I don't like using the word genre, but you know, across genre, I just think that and that's, again, Black folk don't get credit enough for like the wonderful things that we've been able to sonically create, and how they're just so it's just so pervasive, and you can't listen to the Beatles without hearing, you know, a Little Richard, or hearing Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and like all these Black rock and roll musicians, and Chuck Berry, and you know, it's just so pervasive. So I think, yeah, I'll take the easy way out and say Many Ripertons Come to My Garden is one of my favorite albums, because it does such a masterful job of playing up this idea that, you know, Black music is intertextual, and that Black musicians across space and time have always been disavowing this idea of genre.
Man, that is just so, like, I love how you said the 1950s and 60s, because Tatum and I always talk about like the dramatics, like other people of that era, right? I just love it. Yeah, and also I think it's also interesting because how you mentioned like the taking of certain Black artists' work, because it's really important for people to understand that, right, where music comes from. And for Black folk, our music comes from, I feel like, a very different place. You know, it comes from this, it's rooted in struggle, right? So it's so powerful. It's super powerful. Sorry, it's my little spiel, but I love it.
Yeah, no, that I agree. I mean, like, I think you're right. I think that, you know, Black music is trying to deal with an antagonism that's still with us to this day. It's like, what does it mean to live in a world that didn't really anticipate that, at least in the new world, didn't anticipate your survival, or that your survival wasn't part of the plan, basically, right? You were, you know, either you were colonized, or colonized people, or people that were enslaved, and sometimes those go hand in hand. So what does it mean to be a part of a world that didn't plan? I would say plan is a pretty bad word, but like didn't anticipate the survival of Black people across the globe. And so I think a lot of most Black music, whether explicitly or not, is trying to think about that antagonism, and also trying to not center white people in the same way, not center whiteness or white people. So yeah.
Definitely. Trying to make sense of just a concept that really doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're early on in your professional and your teaching career, and we wanted to know, what are some of the things that you've learned so far that you plan on taking with you throughout your professional life?
Realizing early on that who I am as a person is not who I am professionally, or that kind of conflation between the two doesn't have to exist. And for my own health and well-being, I believe that who I am outside of what I do matters more to me. So that's been a really important lesson to learn. And just, you know, as a young Black scholar, you're coming up against institutions that never maybe imagined that not only you could be a part of that institution, but that you would be doing a particular kind of work that doesn't really make sense to the kind of institutional logics. So for me, that just knowing that, okay, I'm probably going to be antagonized in certain ways, and I'm probably going to feel alienated in some ways. And that doesn't have to do with anyone's intention per se, but it's just the institutionalization of higher education in this country and elsewhere. So that's trying to hold on to myself. It's like, oh, I know that sounds vague and weird, but truly I'm just trying to hold on to who I know that I am outside of the work that I do has been really important. And I think also building, which I've really kind of sucked at, because I've been bouncing around the past couple of years and I am like not on the tenure track yet. So that's been a struggle. But building community with other Black scholars and emerging scholars is really important to me. And, you know, building with colleagues that I know that I can trust and have my back, and that I don't have to explain my plight to, is like really foundational to me surviving the past couple of years, just being contingent faculty and trying to find my place, and the kind of hardship that comes with that, which when you find your folk, you are also, they'll reassure you and remind you of who you are and why you, not only why you do the work that you do, but what the particular ethics are around the work that you do and what your commitments are to not just yourself, but your commitments to other people are, right? There's a way to do research and there's a way to write about this stuff. There's a way to treat colleagues. There's a way to look out for other emerging Black scholars in particular, and not gatekeep, all that stuff. I had to kind of learn the hard way. Not that I had investments in it, but it happened to me. So it's like, okay, this is what I don't want to do or be, right? I don't want to why make it harder on a Black scholar that's a young Black scholar when they're already facing so many challenges and antagonisms? How can I, you know, when you're a Black person in an industry or in a profession, sometimes you're meant to feel like you should want to be the only one, that you should want to be the kind of singular tokenized figure that gets all the praise and glory for what you do. And I just don't, and I've seen that kind of anxiety play out, like folks feeling like, well, if I don't have this thing singularly, or if I don't have all the things, then I'm not going to have anything. And it sucks, but it's sometimes a part of like a Black professional class, if I guess I could say that. And I just do not believe that it has to be that way, that we can across class, because that's a whole nother thing I don't even want to get into, but Black people can look out for Black people and still have what they need, you know, and still be successful, however you're defining that, and still have the things that you need in order to not only survive this world, but to fundamentally change the conditions under which we all have to live and work and be in this on this planet. So
that's important. That's super, super important.
Just holding space for each other and creating spaces for each other and inviting other people in is very, very important. So yeah, heard that.
For the people in the back.
You know who you are.
Okay, and then also we're almost done, but going back to your like professional career as an instructor, what are some of the things you hope to bring to the world of academia?
I just hope that I can bring generosity and kindness, because that's not always a part of academia. Which is a funny thing. I always feel like people think, not I'm mean, but I'm a very like shy person, and I'm pretty like I'm not standoffish, but I just like I'm good at hiding away and just trying to do the work that I'm doing, and I know that doesn't always serve me. But I just hope that you know, I can always extend kindness and generosity and be there for folk. And I hope that people think that they can come to me and like, I don't know, that people can feel that way about me, which is a total like insecure thing that I have. Like, I want people to not think that I'm awful, or that I want people to like feel like, which I know it's like my own little like anxiety and hysteria around that. But I do think that, you know, one thing I wish, if anything, I could bring to academia, you know, apart from the work, is just kindness and generosity and honesty too, and a level of care. Like all those things are very important to me as a person, and I hope that professionally I can extend that in my field.
Yeah, that's so nice. I love that you're saying that, because, you know, for your future pupils or your future like coworkers, I'm like, you're gonna be amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's such a sweet thing to say too,
Yeah.
because usually you think about academia and sometimes it seems very like self-serving.
Maybe a bit cutthroat.
Yeah, very cutthroat.
It is.
When
It can be.
generosity and kindness, like that kind of gets to the root of what learning is and being a teacher is. So that's so sweet. And like, I don't see how anybody could think that you're awful, because you're wonderful.
Yeah.
And like, I get the same way sometimes because I'm shy too. And I'm like, I'm the Goblin King. Nobody likes me.
No.
You're wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We had such a great time talking to you. You're so nice, or you're so kind.
You're so super.
But no, so awesome to talk to you, and I'm glad that I got to talk to you again after seeing your chat. Like, I think that I called it a chat.
It's fine. It was like yeah, totally. I'm with that.
Exactly. Yeah. So great to talk to you. We really appreciate your time, and we hope to, you know, be able to take one of your classes or see you talk again, because it was we learned so much.
We did. And adding on to that, you know, you're such a beautiful person, such a beautiful soul. So I enjoyed this, you know. And also lots of things that you said about the Black music industry, you know, got like wheels in my head turning. So yeah, Tatum and I will probably discuss that later. But yeah, thank you so much
for
again.
having me. Yeah, really, thank you for having me. You guys are awesome, and continue to do the good work that you're doing. And yeah, hopefully, who knows what's gonna happen, but and then in the future, maybe you'll be able to take a class with me somewhere sometime.
We hope so.
Alrighty, have a good day. Bye.
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of TWT. It was so fun to talk to Dr. Proctor. So nice, so smart, so sharp. So yeah, definitely looking forward to listening to that album again, Come Into My Garden.
Minnie Riperton.
Look it up. Also, this one's good too.
This one's good.
Fifth Dimension.
Yes.
Aquarius. Look it up. Okay.
Bye, you guys. Until next time. Bye.